Welcome back to Logan's Voice, a place where we speak the truth, break silence, and keep the memories of those we've lost alive by fighting for the living. I'm Doug Ballinger, Logan's dad. And whether this is your first time listening or you've been walking this road with me for a while now, I want to thank you for being here. Today's episode is personal and heavy, but it's also necessary. When someone dies from a heart attack, a car crash, or cancer, we see sympathy. People show up. They bring casseroles, send cards, wrap their arms around the family, and say things like, I am so sorry for your loss. How can I help? But when someone dies from fentanyl poisoning or a drug related death, so often we hear instead is silence, or worse, whispers, judgments, blame, even shame. Grief, it's already hard, but traumatic grief is soul crushing. Grief with stigma, that's a whole different kind of pain. This episode is about that silence, that judgment, that space where people avoid eye contact or change the subject when you speak your child's name. It's about how differently families like mine are treated after losing someone to fentanyl poisoning, and how that treatment makes it even harder to heal. But it's also about smashing that stigma, because the truth is, our loved ones didn't choose to die, they were poisoned. They were struggling, they were human, and they deserved better. So today, we're going to talk openly about how stigma shows up, what it does to families, and what we can all do to push back against it together. Because I won't stay silent, not for a second. I am Logan's voice, and I will speak for him every damn day. Let's get to it. The stigma just hits different. When someone dies from cancer, the community rallies. When someone dies in a car accident, it's called a tragedy. When someone dies by suicide, there's heartbreak and often a memorial. But when someone dies from fentanyl poisoning or a drug related death, the reaction is much different. Suddenly the phone stops ringing, the condolences dry up, and you can almost feel people pulling away. They don't know what to say, so they say nothing, or they say too much, things that cut like knives. People ask questions they'd never ask about any other cause of death, like, were they using again? Did you see it coming? Why didn't you get them help? Or worse, well, they made their choices. Let me be perfectly clear. Losing a child to this crisis doesn't make you a bad parent. Dying from addiction doesn't make someone a bad person. And not every overdose is a choice. Many, like Logan's, are poisonings. One dose, one time, and they never knew what hit them. But the stigma doesn't leave space for that complexity. It paints people in black and white, good or bad, strong or weak, deserving or not. And when stigma walks in the room, compassion tends to walk out. After Logan died, I noticed it immediately. Some people I thought would be there disappeared. Others didn't know what to say, so they avoided saying anything at all. And then there were the ones who thought they were being helpful, but their words were soaked in shame, masked as advice or opinions. And I believe that's the reality for so many of us walking this road. We not only carry our grief, we carry the weight of other people's discomfort. And let me tell you, that weight is heavy. It's heavy when someone changes the subject when you say your child's name. It's heavy when you're left out of family conversations because your grief is too much. It's heavy when people treat your loss as less legitimate, less tragic because of how your loved one died. This is why we have to talk about stigma again, because as long as it lives in silence, it keeps hurting people who are already in pain. Why does stigma hurt the living? Well, let me tell you, stigma doesn't just follow the one who died, it haunts those of us who are left behind. After a death from fentanyl poisoning or overdose, families like mine aren't just grieving, we're defending, explaining, justifying. We're walking through one of the darkest seasons of our lives, and at the same time, we're fending off judgment that says this kind of grief doesn't deserve the same compassion. That's not just wrong, it's harmful. Stigma isolates people. It keeps us from speaking our loved one's name. It makes parents feel ashamed instead of supported. It silences siblings, grandparents, and friends who are all hurting too. I can't tell you how many people have messaged me privately to say, my son died too. I just don't talk about it because people don't understand. Or my daughter overdosed, and even at the funeral, people were whispering. We're told, sometimes directly, sometimes subtly, to move on quickly, to not dwell on it, to not make people uncomfortable. But that silence, that forced shame, it does damage. It prevents healing. It prevents understanding. And most importantly, it prevents change. Because if families are too afraid to talk about what really happened, how will the next family know what to look out for? How will they learn what questions to ask, what signs to watch for, what resources they might need? When I talk about Logan, his life, his struggles, his eventual death from fentanyl poisoning, I know that it makes people uncomfortable. But I just push right through those uncomfortable conversations and try to bring the person along with me, because eventually they will understand that the message that Logan's voice still has resonates somewhere within them. And sometimes there's a new understanding for the person that was feeling uncomfortable. So I push through those conversations. And mostly it's because the power I have in being an activist, an advocate for change, an advocate for the family suffering. That's why I push through. Stigma keeps addiction in the shadows. It keeps conversations behind closed doors. It keeps good people from asking for help because they don't want to be labeled, judged, or treated like they're broken. When Logan first started struggling, I didn't know how deep he was. He was smart, he was social, he had a charm, confidence, and an army of people who loved him. But like so many, he also learned how to wear a mask, and the world taught him how to keep it on. Because when you grow up in a world that mocks addiction, when you hear people call users junkies or losers, when you watch how grieving families are treated, you learn to keep that pain hidden. Stigma didn't just hurt Logan, it hurt me, it hurt our family, and it's hurting countless others right now. So when I talk about smashing stigma, I'm not just throwing around a buzzword, I'm talking about saving lives. I'm talking about creating a space where people can say, I'm struggling, and do it without fear or rejection. And I'm talking about letting grieving families grieve. without shame. Now, stigma doesn't just appear out of nowhere. It's built over time, layer by layer, through the stories we tell, the headlines we read, the words we use, and the beliefs that get passed down from generation to generation. Let's talk about where it comes from, because you can't smash something if you don't understand how it got there. First, there's the media. For decades, addiction has been portrayed as a moral failure or criminal behavior. In TV shows, drug users are often the villains, the dirty, unpredictable characters, never the kid next door or the class president or the young mom working two jobs. And overdose deaths, they're treated like cautionary tales, not tragedies. Even the language we hear in news reports reinforces it. Drug overdose victim instead of person. Addicted, found dead. Instead, beloved son, daughter, friend. Words matter, and they shape how the public sees this crisis. And then there's generational belief systems. A lot of us were raised with phrases like, they made their bed, tough love is the only way, or they chose that life. But addiction is a disease, not a decision. And the people struggling the most are often the ones trying so hard to escape their pain, just in all the wrong ways. We also have to talk about religion and shame. In some circles, substance use is seen as a spiritual weakness or lack of character. Parents who lose a child to addiction are sometimes met with pity, but rarely with understanding. It becomes this unspoken message: if you'd have done better, this wouldn't have happened. That is a cruel and dangerous lie. And then there's politics and policy. We've criminalized addiction for so long that it's easier for people to end up in prison than in treatment. The war on drugs didn't end the problem, it just filled up the jails and built barriers to care. And depending on the color of your skin or the neighborhood you live in, the stigma can even be more brutal. Racial bias in addiction treatment and media coverage is real, and we cannot ignore that either. So when someone says, why is there so much stigma around fentanyl deaths? The answer is because we've been taught to fear, blame, and dehumanize people with addiction, because we've swallowed false narratives about what addiction looks like and who it affects. And because until recently, we haven't made enough room in our hearts or our systems for compassion over condemnation. But the truth, stigma is learned, which means it can be unlearned. And that's where our power lies. Let's talk about smashing the stigma and what we can do. We've talked about what it looks like. We've talked about how it shows up and where it comes from. Now it's time to talk about what we can do about it. Because here's the truth. Stigma only has power if we let it. And every single one of us, whether we've lost someone, love someone who's still struggling, or just want to make a difference, has a role to play in tearing that stigma down. Let's talk about real ways we can smash stigma starting today. Number one, speak the truth out loud. Say their name, tell their stories, don't sugarcoat it, and don't hide behind vague language if you don't want to. When we tell the truth about how our loved ones died, we give others permission to do the same. And when we do that, we take stigma's favorite tool, silence, away. I talk about Logan because his life mattered, because his death wasn't a punchline or a statistic. It was a tragedy. And I won't let it be anything less than that. And number two, words shape perception. We need to use better language. Let's stop using terms like junkie, addict, or druggie and use first person language. Person with a substance use disorder, someone struggling with addiction. These small changes add up. They remind people that we're talking about humans, not headlines. Number three, let's educate others, even when it's uncomfortable. Most stigma comes from ignorance. So be the one who shares the facts. Talk about fentanyl poisoning. Talk about counterfeit pills. Explain the difference between physical dependence and addiction. Point people to resources like the CDC, harm reduction coalitions, or support groups. You don't have to be a professional to speak up. Just be willing to have the conversation. You don't need perfection, just connection. And number four, challenge stigma when you hear it. When someone says, well, they chose that life, say, no one chooses to die. When someone rolls their eyes about Narcan or harm reduction, remind them that every life is worth saving. When you hear silence where there should be compassion, be that voice that speaks up. Will it be awkward? Absolutely. But change never happens in comfort zones. And number five, create and protect safe spaces. Whether it's a podcast like this, a support group, or a conversation at your kitchen table, create a space where people can speak freely. No shame, no blame, just real people sharing real stories. That's what we're doing here, and that matters more than you know. We don't fight stigma by being perfect. We fight it by being present, by showing up, speaking out, by saying our kids mattered, their lives mattered, and our grief deserves respect, not judgment. I know I can't change everyone's mind, but I can change how I respond. I can live in a way that honors Logan, not just in memory, but in mission. And if you're listening right now, you can do the same. Let's talk about some of the real world ways to smash stigma through raising awareness and advocacy. One thing we can do is wear it, say it, and show it. Rock shirts, bracelets, hats, or pins that raise awareness. Put fentanyl awareness in the stigma or your loved one's name front and center. People will ask, and that opens the door for real conversations. When people ask me what my purple shirt represents or what the wings represent that are on the front of my shirt, I tell them it's not just a slogan, it's my son's story. Logan matters. On the inside of my right forearm, I have my son's signature tattooed. When people see that and ask, what is that? I proudly tell them that is my son. His life was taken by fentanyl poisoning. And that either scares them and causes them to run away. They oftentimes become uncomfortable. But I push through that conversation and have an open, honest discussion about what took my son's life, about what we can do to smash the stigma, and about what they can do to support those that are struggling. And here's something I haven't done yet, but it's in my future plans, is to write an op-ed or a letter to the editor. Share your experience in local newspapers or digital media outlet. Talk about stigma, fentanyl poisoning, or your grief journey. Personal stories hit harder than statistics. And the more people that do this, and the more times it gets printed in a newspaper or in a media outlet online, that helps smash the stigma and normalizes the conversation. So, a title might be something like, "We lost our son to fentanyl poisoning. What we didn't expect was the silence that followed." Host Community Awareness Night. Partner with schools, libraries, churches, or recovery centers and do something like screen documentaries like Fentanyl, Death Incorporated, The Daily Dose, The Real Deal on Fentanyl. Share your story. Invite others to speak. Make it interactive. And for a bonus, you can offer free Narcan and education on how to use it if you can. Something I'm becoming more familiar with every day is learning how to use your platform, any size, social media, podcasts like this one, blogs, or even on your holiday card. Use your voice. Post a memory of your loved one with the message, "This is what fentanyl took. This is why I speak out." Don't be afraid to show the human side of loss and recovery. And challenge harmful language. When someone calls a person a junkie or says they did it to themselves, interrupt that. Calmly offer a new perspective. "I used to think that too, until I lost my son." Educating someone kindly but firmly goes a long way. You can get involved with or start a local task force. Join your town's opioid response team, recovery council, or school advisory board. Push for evidence-based education, not scare tactics. Advocate for mental health and harm reduction services in your area. I know in our state of Arkansas, Hope Movement Coalition plays an active role in raising awareness and supporting the families that have suffered loss to fentanyl poisoning or overdose. Hope Movement Coalition also wraps their arms around those that are still struggling and celebrates those that are in recovery. And create content that breaks the silence. I do this almost on a daily basis just to smash that stigma. Post a short reel about my story and why stigma keeps people from getting help. I've recorded little videos, reels about things not to say to a grieving parent, and I share myths versus facts about fentanyl on Instagram and Facebook. And we can also call or email our lawmakers. Share your story and ask them to support laws that treat overdose deaths seriously. Ask for better funding for mental health and harm reduction. And remind them we're not just grieving, we're voters, and this matters. Create safe spaces for others. Start a grief support group. Moderate an online forum. Be that person that says, "You can talk to me, no shame, no judgment." And most importantly, say their name unapologetically in conversation, on your car. In my book or my podcast, I say Logan's name constantly. In everything you do, say their name, because stigma dies every time we refuse to hide our loved one's story. We speak because we must. I speak because I must. If you're still with me, thank you. Thank you for listening with your heart open. Because this episode wasn't just about fentanyl or overdose or even grief. It was about the weight that families like mine are forced to carry long after the funeral ends and the world moves on. Stigma didn't die the day Logan did. It showed up. It crept into conversations. It stared back in silence when I said his name out loud. But I've learned something. Stigma thrives in silence. It dies in truth. And truth, that's what I'm here to speak. Our loved ones were not just addicts, they were artists, dancers, brothers, sons. They were kids who laughed at dumb jokes, blasted music too loud, and hugged us tighter than anyone else. They were human, and they deserved more than this cruel silence that surrounds their death. So, how do we smash that stigma? We speak, we educate, we challenge bad information with real stories. We show up in shirts that say one pill can kill and end the stigma. We make podcasts, post reels, write letters, and share their names. We become unapologetically loud about our grief and our love. I do this because Logan can't, but I can. And if you've lost someone or love someone still in a fight, you can too. You don't have to be a professional. You don't have to say it perfectly. You just have to show up and speak your truth. Because every time we do, someone else feels a little less alone, a little more seen, and maybe, just maybe, they'll find the courage to speak up too. So let's be clear. Our grief is not shameful. Our children's deaths are not footnotes. And we will not sit quietly while stigma shames us into silence. Not anymore. We are the voice, we are the movement, and we are not done. Until next time, thank you for walking this road with me. I am Logan's voice. I am Logan's dad, and I will not be silent any longer.